Read-alouds involving higher-order discussion among children and their teacher before, during, and after reading support comprehension. In this classroom, the class will be discussing a book they read earlier in the day.
Me, Jane, tells the story of the scientist Jane Goodall, and it introduces students to her as a young child and teaches them about her dream of becoming a scientist and moving to Africa and studying animals in the wild. So when teaching them how to have a text-based discussion around a book, I typically start by reading the book. I tell them what the focus is for the book, and then I stop at certain stopping points and ask an open-ended question such as, what was Jane's dream? And then once I have one student answer, I typically like to ask who can add on to that or encourage them to go back in the book and pull evidence from the book. I often implement turn-in talks where I might ask an open-ended question and have them turn and share with a friend. And then after everyone has had a chance to share their thoughts, we turn back as a whole group and they get to hear everyone's answers as a whole group. Since we were revisiting the book, I decided this time that I was just gonna show them the cover, remind them what the book was about, and tell them that today I wanted to focus on the author's purpose. Why did the author write this book? What did he want us to know about Jane? So put your eyes up here. Last Friday, we read this book titled Me, Jane by Patrick McDonnell. And this was a biography that Patrick McDonnell wrote about Jane Goodall. So we learned that Jane Goodall was a scientist who studied chimpanzees and the environment. So today I'd like us to have a discussion about what information Patrick McDonnell wanted us to learn about Jane Goodall. Before we start talking about that, we have our sentence stems up here. Can you put your eyes over by the sentence stems? And we use sentence stems to have a discussion with each other. So I'm going to read the first one just as a reminder. Can you repeat it after me so they're stuck in your brain? Can you say more?
Can you say more?
What do you mean by that?
What do you mean by that?
Can you help me understand?
Can you help me understand?
I agree with you because.
I agree with you because.
I disagree because.
I disagree because.
An example from the book is.
An example from the book is.
So when you're having a discussion today about what Patrick McDonnell wanted to teach us about Jane Goodall, we're going to ask that you use some of these sentence stems to talk with each other. Some ways that I prompt for discussion and keep discussion going are with sentence stems. I might say, can you show me an example of this? Or who can add on to that? Or who agrees with so-and-so? So, raise your hand if you can share one thing you think the author wanted us to learn about Jane Goodall. What is one thing, Cleo, that we learned about Jane Goodall in this book, Me, Jane?
Jane Goodall likes monkeys.
Jane Goodall likes monkeys. Jane Goodall likes chimpanzees. Who can add on to that? Louis?
She liked to have some animals, and she wanted to be like a jungle watcher for chimpanzees.
She wanted to look and watch chimpanzees in the jungle. Ashlyn?
She helps them live in their habitats because they're almost extinct.
We learned from the nonfiction book we read that chimpanzees are endangered. So Jane Goodall helps keep them safe in their habitats. Caroline?
She sat in a chicken coop for 4 hours waiting for a chicken to lay his egg.
Let's look at that example from the book. Caroline shared that Jane sat in a chicken coop for 4 hours waiting for the eggs to hatch. Here she is, waiting for the eggs. And she observed the miracle. Who can add on? Who can tell us more? Michael?
She went in Africa so she could study the chimpanzees because she really liked chimpanzees, and her friend was in Africa, so she decided to go with her.
Maya, do you remember that she wanted to go to Africa to study the chimpanzees? Let's look at that page in the book. I think it was later on in the story. Here it is. Jane dreamed of a life in Africa too. What else did Patrick McDonald want us to learn about Jane Goodall? Waylon?
Is she wants to learn more about the chimpanzee.
I think it's a great idea to encourage kindergartners to discuss text specifically with one another, because I believe it truly promotes the love of learning. And the more they see their peers interested in a text, or the more they feel they can contribute to a conversation surrounding a text, the more they believe in themselves as a learner or a reader. And I think the more they want to read when they see that reading teaches them information or includes interesting topics. I think it just is a good motivation for them as they grow older. So Stefania, what's an example from the book that shows us that Jane's dream was to work with animals?
The drawing.
Her drawings and her journal. Who agrees with Stefania? You can use the sentence stem. I agree with you because... Ashlyn, can you use that sentence stem? Say, I agree with you because...
It looks like she cut out stuff and she drew stuff.
Why did she draw all these different pictures?
Because she loves studying animals.
Because she loves studying animals. Who can give us another example from the book? Caroline?
When she wanted to see the chickens, after she saw the egg hatch, there was a bunch of baby chicks.
Mm-hmm. So what is that picture where she saw the eggs hatch? What does that tell us, Caroline, about Jane?
That she wanted to study the animals.
That she wanted to study animals, such as chickens. My hope is that they can all work together to have a discussion surrounding the big picture. What was Jane's dream? How do you know? What page could you find that on? And if they can do this during whole group read-alouds, my hope is that when they're reading with each other, whether it be partner reading in the library or during guided reading groups with me, they start to become more willing and able to lead these discussions about texts on their own.
Learn more at literacyessentials.org.